I didn't think much of the rules when I first saw them. That was probably my first mistake. People always say they would know better. They hear a story like this, and they think they would quit the second someone handed them a list of strange instructions. They think they would laugh, toss the paper on the desk, and drive straight back home. That is easy to say when you are not broke. That is easy to say when your truck is not running on bald tires, when your rent is not 2 months behind, and when your phone does not light up every morning with calls from numbers you already know you cannot answer. I was 27 when I took the night job at the Hartwell Lodge. It sat inside the north edge of Red Elk National Park, about 40 miles past the last real town and 12 miles up a service road that the county stopped plowing unless someone begged them. In summer, it was a tourist place. Hikers, birdwatchers, families with roof boxes, older couples in matching fleece jackets. In winter, it was supposed to be closed. That was what I thought, anyway. Hartwell Lodge had been built in the late 1940s, back when people still thought putting a big stone hotel in the middle of the mountains was a sign of good taste and not a maintenance nightmare. It had 3 floors, a long front porch, a lobby with a fireplace big enough to stand in, and a dining room that looked out over a frozen lake. At least, it did when the windows were not crusted over with ice. By the time I started, the lodge was half hotel, half storage building, and half something else no one wanted to name. I know that is too many halves. That is how it felt. The owners kept it open for limited winter operations, which meant a few government workers, utility contractors, hunters with special permits, and the occasional stranded driver. Most nights there were no new arrivals. Sometimes no guests at all. The job was mostly sitting behind the front desk, watching cameras, answering the desk phone, keeping the boiler log, doing laundry if housekeeping fell behind, and making sure nobody froze to death in the parking lot. The pay was not good, but the room was free. That was the part that got me. I had been living out of my truck for 3 weeks before my friend Caleb told me about the position. We had gone to high school together. He worked seasonal maintenance for the park and knew people at the lodge. He said their last night auditor had quit during a storm and left without even taking his last paycheck. That should have told me something. Caleb told me not to worry about it. He said winter made people strange up there. Too much dark. Too much snow. Bad roads. No cell signal. He said I was stubborn enough to handle it. He was right about that, at least. I drove up on a Thursday afternoon in early December with 2 duffel bags, a box of canned food, and a nervous feeling I kept blaming on the road. The drive to Hartwell Lodge was beautiful in a way that got old fast. Snow packed itself into the trees until the branches bowed over the road. The sky stayed low and gray. Every turn looked the same. White shoulder, black pines, dull guardrail, drop-off. I remember thinking that if I missed the lodge and kept driving, I might not know it until the road simply ended. The building appeared all at once. It rose out of the snow at the base of a dark slope, its steep roof buried under a heavy white cap. The sign out front was made of carved wood and hung from 2 posts. Only the bottom half was visible because snow had drifted up around it. Hartwell Lodge. The front windows glowed yellow in the dusk. For a second, I felt relieved. Then I noticed that the parking lot was almost empty. There were 3 vehicles. A white Park Service truck, an old green Subaru, and a black pickup with chains on the tires. The rest of the lot was smooth snow, undisturbed except for tire tracks that curved in from the road and stopped. I parked beside the Subaru and sat with the engine running longer than I needed to. Inside, the lobby smelled like old wood coffee and something metallic from the radiators. The ceiling was high and crossed with dark beams. There were mounted antlers over the fireplace and faded photographs of the lodge from when it first opened. Men in hats. Women standing beside sleds. A frozen lake behind them, flat and white as a sheet. A woman stood behind the front desk, writing in a binder. She was maybe 60, with short gray hair and a face that did not waste expressions. She wore a thick cardigan over a collared shirt, and had a name tag that said Marilyn. "You're Daniel," she said. I said I was. She looked me over like she was checking a delivery. "You have boots?" I lifted one foot a little. "Real boots?" "They're waterproof." That wasn't what I asked. That was my introduction to Marilyn Voss, general manager of Hartwell Lodge and the kind of person who could make a question feel like paperwork. She gave me a tour in 10 minutes. Front desk. Office. Laundry. Kitchen. Dining room. Pantry. Boiler room. Staff hall. Stairwell. Guest floors. Emergency exits. Generator shed, which I was not supposed to go to unless she called me herself, or the power failed for more than 5 minutes. My staff room was behind the kitchen, down a narrow hall that had once been used by housekeeping. It had a twin bed, a dresser, a small desk, and a window that looked at a snowbank. It was not much, but it had heat. I almost thanked her too many times. She told me my shift would run from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week, sometimes 6 if the weather trapped staff in place. I would train with her for 1 night, and then work alone. She said the work was simple if I followed procedure. That word mattered to Marilyn. Procedure. Not rules, at least not at first. She showed me the old computer system. It was beige, slow, and connected to a dot matrix printer that sounded like an insect when it ran. She showed me the keys, which were still physical keys on brass tags, because the lodge had never upgraded to key cards. She showed me the guest ledger, the cash drawer, the radio, the camera monitor, the emergency phone, and the binder of winter procedures. Most of it was normal. Check boiler pressure every hour. Log exterior temperature at midnight, 2 a.m., and 4 a.m. Keep the vestibule rug dry so people did not slip. Do not leave the front desk unattended for more than 5 minutes unless a registered guest needed assistance. If plows called, record road status in the black log. If a guest arrived after midnight, confirm reservation before unlocking the inner lobby door. There were maybe 30 things like that. Boring things. Sensible things. Then, close to 9:30 p.m., Marilyn pulled open the drawer under the register and took out a folded sheet of yellow paper. It had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases were soft. She placed it on the desk between us. "This is the night sheet," she said. I thought she meant another checklist. She kept 2 fingers on the paper and looked at me for the first time like she was trying to decide whether I was worth warning. "Read it now," she said. "Then read it again before midnight. Keep it under the keyboard. Do not take it to your room. Do not copy it. Do not make jokes about it with guests. Do not leave it where anyone can see it." I almost smiled, because it sounded like she was messing with me. She did not smile back. So I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was not hers. It was blocky and pressed hard into the page, the kind of writing that leaves grooves. At the top, someone had written, "Night rules, winter only." Under that were 7 rules. 1. Between 12:30 a.m. and 12:40 a.m., lock the inner vestibule door and pull the lobby blinds. If headlights appear in the drive during those 10 minutes, do not look outside. 2. If a guest asks for room 214, say, "That room is unavailable." Say it once only. Then step away from the desk until they leave. 3. If the phone rings from room 307, let it ring 7 times. On the 7th ring, answer and say, Front desk. You already checked out. Hang up before the caller responds. 4. If the camera shows snow tracks leading out of the lobby doors, but none leading in, sweep the vestibule before sunrise. Do not follow the tracks. 5. If the ledger printer types a guest name in red ink, copy the name exactly into the blue book before 2:17 a.m. Do not say the name aloud. 6. If a little girl in a yellow coat asks for hot chocolate after 2 a.m., give her an empty cup and point her toward the dining room. Do not touch her hand. 7. If the west hallway clock stops, stay on the lobby rug and keep both hands visible until it starts again. I read the list twice because I thought I had missed something that would make it make sense. I had not. When I looked up, Marilyn was watching me. "What is this?" I asked. "The night sheet. Is it a joke for new people?" "No." I waited for more. She did not give me more. "Why winter only?" "Because that's when we need it." I remember the way she said that. Not dramatic. Not spooky. Just tired. I asked what happened if I did not follow them. She glanced toward the dark windows at the front of the lobby. The blinds were still open then. Beyond the glass, snow moved through the porch lights in thin white lines. "People stop working here," she said. "That's it. That's enough. I should have left. I know that. But I had $36 in my checking account, half a tank of gas, and nowhere to go that night except back down a road that was already filling in with snow. So I folded the paper and slid it under the keyboard like she told me. At 10 p.m., Marilyn clocked out. The lodge went quiet in a way I had never heard before. Buildings in towns are never really quiet. There are engines, dogs, voices, pipes, neighbors, traffic, sirens, somebody's TV through a wall. The Hartwell Lodge had none of that. It had the hum of lights, the tick of the radiator, the low breath of the boiler, and wind pressing against old windows. Marilyn stayed in the manager's apartment on the second floor, above the office. Caleb was in one of the maintenance rooms near the loading dock. There were 2 registered guests that first night. A retired couple in room 109, and a park biologist in room 302. I did not see any of them after 10:15. For the first hour, I felt stupid for being nervous. I checked the cameras. There were 8 of them. Front porch. Parking lot. Vestibule. Lobby. West hallway. East hallway. Dining room. Loading dock. The images were grainy black and white. The front porch camera had a small dead spot in the lower left corner where eyes had formed over the lens. The dining room camera flickered every few seconds. The west hallway camera showed a long corridor with closed doors and a clock mounted at the far end. The clock was old, round, and plain. I looked at it for too long because of Rule 7. The first strange thing happened at 11:48 p.m. I was entering boiler pressure into the log when the printer behind the desk made one quick sound. Not the full insect chatter it made when printing a receipt. Just a clack. I turned around. A single line had printed on the continuous paper. Arrival, walk-in. Below that, the name field was blank. No reservation number. No rate. No room assignment. I stared at it, waiting for more. Nothing printed. I checked the front doors. Empty. I checked the parking lot camera. The same 3 vehicles sat under a fine layer of snow. No headlights. No movement. The computer screen had not changed. I told myself it was just a glitch. Old computer. Old printer. Old building. It made sense. That would have made sense, except the timestamp on the printout said 12:31 a.m. I looked at the computer clock. 11:49. I looked at my phone. No service, but the time said 11:49. I tore off the page and put it in the trash under the desk. Then I took it back out, because something about throwing it away felt wrong. I folded it and slid it into the back of the winter procedure binder. I did not mention it to anyone. Not then. At midnight I read the night sheet again. The rules looked even stranger the second time, but not funny anymore. There is a kind of unease that comes from not understanding whether you are being warned or tested. I kept thinking about the way Marilyn had said, "People stop working here." Like it was not the worst answer she could have given. At 12:25, I started watching the time. The lobby had 6 tall windows facing the porch and drive. In summer, I imagined they made the place feel open and grand. At night in winter, there were just black panels with the room reflected in them. I could see myself behind the desk. I could see the lamps. I could see the antlers above the fireplace. At 12:29, I walked to the vestibule. The Hartwell Lodge had 2 sets of front doors. The outside doors opened to a small glassed-in entryway where guests could stomp snow off their boots. The inner doors opened into the lobby. The outside doors were kept unlocked for emergency access, but the inner doors had a heavy deadbolt. I turned the lock. Then I pulled the lobby blinds. One by one. The blinds were old and stiff. They rattled as they came down, and each time I pulled one, I had the childish feeling that something might be standing outside the glass when the slats closed. Nothing was. At 12:30, the lobby felt smaller. I went back to the desk and watched the monitor instead. The front porch camera showed the outside doors. Snow blew across the steps. The parking lot camera showed darkness, trees, and 3 buried vehicles. No headlights. 12:32. 12:34. 12:36. I started to relax. Then the parking lot camera bloomed white. Headlights appeared at the edge of the frame. They did not come from the road. That was the first detail I noticed. The road entered from the right side of the camera view, but the lights appeared straight ahead, between the trees, where no vehicle could drive without hitting the drainage ditch. They moved slowly. 2 round headlights, low to the ground, softened by snow. My body did something before my mind caught up. I leaned forward. Not much. Just enough that I was almost looking past the monitor and toward the actual windows. The rule came back to me before I moved any more. Do not look outside. So I looked down at the counter. That sounds easy. It was not. The room changed when the headlights reached the front drive. I could see light pressing through the blinds, striping the desk and the floor. It moved across my hands. It brightened the brass key tags behind me. It shone under the lobby doors. I heard an engine, but not clearly. It was muffled, like the sound came through layers of wall. Then the outer vestibule doors opened. I heard them. Cold air slipped into the little entry space. The weather stripping made a low squeal. A gust shook the inner doors in their frame. I kept my head down. Someone stomped snow from their boots. Once. Twice. A pause. Then a knuckle tapped the inner glass. 3 small taps. I looked at the clock over the desk. 12:37. The tap came again. 3 small taps. Then a man's voice said, "Front desk?" He sounded normal. That was the worst part. Not deep. Not distorted. Not far away. Just a tired man standing in the vestibule on a cold night. "Front desk, I have a reservation." I kept looking at the counter. The strip of light under the doors shifted as if he had stepped closer. "Hello?" I thought about what Marilyn had told me. If a guest arrived after midnight, confirm reservation before unlocking the inner lobby door. But the rule said between 12:30 and 12:40, lock the inner vestibule door, and pull the blinds. If headlights appear, do not look outside. It did not say not to talk. It did not say not to open the door. That is how these things get you, I think. Not by making you forget the rules. By making you notice what the rules do not say. The man tapped again. Sir? It's freezing out here. I nearly stood up. Then something moved on the vestibule camera. I could see it on the monitor from the corner of my eye, but I had to turn my head to look properly. I did not. I stayed still. The man sighed. This is ridiculous, he said. At 12:40, the headlights went out. Not faded. Not turned. Just went out. The light under the door vanished. The engine stopped. I waited until 12:42 before I looked at the monitor. The vestibule was empty. No man. No wet footprints. No disturbed rug. The outer doors were closed. On the parking lot camera, there were still only 3 vehicles. I did not open the blinds until 12:45. There were no tire tracks in the drive except the ones already half buried by snow. I told myself it was some kind of reflection. Maybe the plow. Maybe a parked truck turning around somewhere below. Maybe I had misunderstood where the road was on the camera. Maybe the voice had come from the radio, not the door. I told myself a lot of things that night. Most of them did not last. At 1:10 a.m., the retired couple from room 109 came to the desk because the husband wanted extra blankets. His name was Mr. Ainsley. He wore pajama pants, snow boots, and a coat over his undershirt. He was annoyed in the ordinary way that tired old men are annoyed in hotels. Room's cold, he said. I'm sorry about that. I can get you blankets. Heat's making noise too. I'll log it for maintenance. He looked around the lobby. You alone down here? Yes, sir. He made a face that said he would not do that for any amount of money. I gave him 2 wool blankets from the cabinet behind the desk. He signed the linen sheet with a shaking hand. Then he looked past me at the brass key hooks. Still use real keys, he said. Yes, sir. Haven't seen that in years. He turned to leave, then stopped. You got a room 214? The question came so casually that I almost answered without thinking. My hand was still on the cabinet door. What? 214, he said. I used to come here when I was a boy. Could swear my parents stayed in 214. The lobby seemed to lose a little heat. Rule 2. If a guest asks for room 214, say, that room is unavailable. Say it once only. Then step away from the desk until they leave. That room is unavailable, I said. He gave me a strange look. I'm not asking to move. I'm asking if it still exists. I stepped away from the desk. That was harder than it sounds. There is a strong urge, when a guest asks you something, to keep talking. To explain. To soften the answer. To be normal. I walked around to the side table near the fireplace and pretended to straighten brochures. Mr. Ainsley watched me. You all right? He asked. I did not answer. After a few seconds, he gave a dry little laugh. Customer service really has changed. He carried the blankets back toward the east hallway. When he was gone, I checked the room chart. There was no room 214. The second floor had rooms 201 through 213 on the east side, 215 through 222 on the west side, and a housekeeping closet where 214 should have been. The map showed the closet as a narrow rectangle with no label. That seemed like an explanation. Old hotel, missing number, weird superstition. Except Mr. Ainsley had not seemed like he was joking. At 1:30 I made coffee. The kitchen was behind the dining room, through a swinging door. I hated leaving the desk, but the coffee at the front was burned and the rules sheet did not say anything about coffee. I took the radio with me. The kitchen was industrial and cold at the edges. Stainless counters. Rubber mats. Big sinks. The walk-in cooler hummed behind a metal door. I filled the old percolator and stood there while it clicked and hissed. The whole time, I felt like someone was standing just outside the kitchen door. No sound. No shadow. Just that pressure. When I pushed through the swinging door with my coffee, the lobby was empty. The computer screen had gone dark. I moved the mouse. Nothing happened. Then the dot matrix printer started. It printed slowly, one line at a time. The ink was black. Date, 12/09. Time, 1:34. Guest. Room. Note, wants 214. Then the printer stopped. I stared at the page until the perforated paper trembled from the vent above it. The name field was blank again. The computer came back on by itself. I checked arrivals. No new walk-ins. No notes. No activity. I told myself I was tired. That is a useful thing to tell yourself during a night shift. It explains almost everything. A sound you cannot place. A shadow in the corner of a monitor. A detail that changes when you look away. It does not explain paper. I tore the sheet off and folded it with the first one. At 2:03 a.m., the phone rang. Not the outside line. Not the front desk extension. The old room phone console lit up beside the computer. Room 307. The sound was bright and sharp in the quiet lobby. I counted. 1 ring. 2. 3. I looked at the guest list. Room 307 was empty. 4. 5. 6. On the 7th ring I picked up. Front desk. You already checked out. I hung up before the caller responded. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the phone rang again. Room 307. I counted 7 rings. Front desk. You already checked out. I hung up. It rang again. I looked at the clock. 2:06 a.m. The rule did not say what to do if it kept ringing. I let it ring. By the 10th ring, I felt the sound in my teeth. By the 15th, I picked up. That was not breaking the rule exactly. I had already answered on the 7th ring. I told myself that. I told myself I was just making it stop. Front desk, I said. There was breathing on the other end. I froze with the receiver against my ear. It was not heavy breathing. Not theatrical. It was close and slow, like someone trying not to wake a person sleeping beside them. Then a woman whispered, "He's not checked out." I hung up so hard the receiver bounced in its cradle. The phone did not ring again. I sat there for almost 5 minutes with my hand on the receiver, waiting. At 2:14, the printer started. This time the ink was red. I did not know the printer had red ink. It used a ribbon, black on one half and red on the other, but I had not noticed that before. The letters came out pale at first, then darker. Guest, Margaret Ainsley. My mouth went dry. Mr. and Mrs. Ainsley were the retired couple in room 109. I pulled the night sheet from under the keyboard. Rule 5. If the ledger printer types a guest name in red ink, copy the name exactly into the blue book before 2:17 a.m. Do not say the name aloud. I had not seen a blue book. I opened the drawer under the register. Pens, receipt tape, a flashlight, old batteries, the night sheet envelope. No blue book. I checked the shelf under the counter. Winter binder, road log, boiler log, guest folio binder. 2:15. The printer sat there with Margaret Ainsley's name in red, like a wound on the paper. I opened the cabinet with the blankets. No book. I felt panic building in a slow, stupid way because the task was so small. Find a book. Copy a name. Do not say it out loud. It was not a monster. It was not a threat. It was office work with a deadline. 2:16. I crouched and saw a narrow gap between the safe and the wall. Something blue was wedged there. I reached in and pulled out a small hardback book covered in dust. The cover was plain blue cloth. No title. I opened it. The pages were filled with names and dates. Some were written in different hands. Some neat, some shaking, some almost illegible. The dates went back years. I flipped to the first blank line. My hand was sweating so badly the pen slipped. I copied the name exactly. Margaret Ainsley. The moment I finished the last letter, the lobby clock ticked to 2:17. The red ink on the printer paper faded to black. Not all at once. It drained slowly, letter by letter, until it looked like any other printout. I sat back on my heels and laughed once. It came out wrong, so I stopped. A minute later, Mrs. Ainsley came down the east hallway in her nightgown. She walked slowly, holding the wall. I stood so quickly my chair rolled back. "Mrs. Ainsley?" She looked confused. "Where is Harold?" she asked. Her voice was soft and dry. "Your husband?" She nodded. "He went for blankets." I looked toward the hallway. "He came down earlier." "He went back up." "No," she said. "He didn't." I checked the time again. 2:19. I called their room. No answer. I woke Marilyn. I did not tell her about the phone or the red ink. Not at first. I told her Mr. Ainsley was missing. She came down in a robe and boots, fully awake in the way people are when they have been expecting bad news. Caleb showed up 2 minutes later, hair flattened on one side, jacket half-zipped. We searched the lodge. We checked the east hallway, the west hallway, the dining room, the bathrooms, the stairwells, the laundry, the kitchen, the basement door, which was locked, the second floor. No Harold Ainsley. Marilyn asked me exactly what happened. I told her he came down for blankets. He asked about room 214. I said the room was unavailable and stepped away. Her eyes sharpened. "You said it once?" "Yes." "Exactly once?" "Yes." "And then?" "He left." "Did you watch him go into the East Hall?" I hesitated. "No. I was by the fireplace." She closed her eyes for half a second. Caleb looked at her. "What?" "Get Mrs. Ainsley into the office," Marilyn said. "Do not let her go upstairs alone." Then she turned to me. "What else?" I could have lied. I wanted to. Instead, I told her about the phone in 307 and the red name in the ledger. The lobby went quiet except for the wind. "Did you copy it?" Marilyn asked. "Yes." "Before 2:17? "Yes." "Did you say it aloud?" "No." She nodded once. That was all. I expected questions. I expected anger. I expected her to tell me I was imagining things. She did none of that. She picked up the radio and called the Park Dispatch on the emergency channel. She reported a missing guest. She used normal words. Elderly male. Last seen in lobby. Possible confusion. Severe weather. Request welfare search if road conditions allowed. Dispatch said no units could reach us until morning at earliest. That was the first time I understood how alone the lodge really was. At 3:40, Caleb found Mr. Ainsley's slippers. They were in front of the housekeeping closet on the second floor. The closet where room 214 should have been. The door was locked. Marilyn had the key. Inside were shelves of towels, cleaning chemicals, a vacuum, folded sheets, and an old square of wallpaper that did not match the rest of the hallway. No Mr. Ainsley. No blankets. No other door. Mrs. Ainsley kept asking where Harold was. Marilyn sat with her in the office and told her the road crew would come at first light. She said it in a steady voice. The kind of voice you use with frightened children and dying people. At 5:55, the snow stopped. At 6:10, I heard a plow somewhere far down the road. My shift ended at 6, but no one told me to go to bed. By 8:30, park rangers had arrived. They searched outside. They searched the lodge again. They asked me questions in the dining room while morning light turned the windows gray. I told them Mr. Ainsley had come down for blankets and then left my sight. I did not mention room 214. I did not mention the rules. I did not mention the phone. The official assumption was that he had become confused, wandered outside through a side exit, and gotten lost in the storm. It was possible. He was 78. People do impossible things when they are cold and half asleep. But there were no tracks leaving any exit. Not one. The rangers found nothing. Mrs. Ainsley left that afternoon with her daughter, who drove up from Missoula crying and angry and too scared to be angry at anyone specific. Marilyn refunded the room without being asked. Caleb avoided looking at me. I slept 14 hours. When I woke up, it was dark again. My second shift started at 10 p.m. I almost left. I had my bags packed and my coat on at 9:15. I stood in the staff hall listening to the kitchen pipes knock and told myself no amount of free rent was worth it. I would sleep in my truck. I would call my sister. I would find something else. Then I checked my phone by the back door, where one bar sometimes appeared. 3 missed calls from my landlord. A text from my sister asking if I had sent any money yet for Mom's prescription. Another from Caleb. Don't quit tonight. Roads are bad. Talk after shift. I hated him for that text because it worked. At 9:55, I walked into the lobby. Marilyn was behind the desk, wearing the same cardigan, filling out the same binder. She did not ask how I was. She slid the blue book toward me. You keep it here now, she said. She had cleared a space under the printer. I looked at the book. How long has this been happening? Winter has always been bad here. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have. What happened to Mr. Ainsley? She looked down at the ledger. I don't know. But you know something. I know the rules help. Help who? She looked at me then. Everyone's still here. I wanted to yell. I wanted her to admit she had knowingly put me behind that desk with a list of insane rules and no explanation. I wanted her to apologize. Instead, I asked the question that mattered. Why don't you close? She gave a small, bitter smile. The owners have tried. The park has tried. Every time Hartwell is empty for more than 3 nights in winter, someone ends up here anyway. Lost driver. Hiker. Ranger. Contractor. Someone. And there's no one at the desk to tell them no. I thought about the headlights. The man in the vestibule. I have a reservation. Marilyn slid the night sheet under the keyboard. Read it again, she said. Then she left. For the next week, nothing big happened. That was almost worse. I settled into the routine because people can settle into anything if it repeats enough. I brewed coffee. Logged temperatures. Checked the boiler. Folded towels. Watched the cameras. Refilled the brochure rack even though no one took brochures in December. The lodge had its own rhythm. At 10:30, the radiators clicked. At 11, the wind usually rose. At midnight, the kitchen freezer hummed harder for 10 minutes. At 12:30, I locked the inner vestibule door and pulled the blinds. Most nights, no headlights came. At 1:15, the dining room camera flickered. At 2, I made coffee I rarely drank. At 3:20, the building made a settling sound from somewhere above the lobby, like a person shifting in bed. At 4, I checked the boiler. At 5, I started wanting sunrise like it was a person coming to help me. On the 4th night, the camera showed tracks. I was doing the cash count when movement caught my eye on the vestibule monitor. Not a person. Just the rug. There were wet marks on it. Long dark ovals like boot prints. I looked at the front doors. The lobby side was empty. I had locked the inner vestibule door at 12:30 and unlocked it at 12:42. The outer doors had not opened. The camera had shown nothing. But on the monitor, tracks ran from the inner lobby doors toward the outer doors. Out of the building. None led in. I walked slowly to the vestibule. The inner doors were unlocked by then. I opened one and looked down. The prints were real. Snow had melted into the rough black mat, leaving water in the shape of soles. There were 7 prints total. They began right at the inner threshold, as if someone had stepped out of the lobby through a closed door, crossed the vestibule, and left through the outer doors. The outside doors were closed. I could see the porch beyond the glass. No tracks on the snow outside. Rule 4. If the camera shows snow tracks leading out of the lobby doors, but none leading in, sweep the vestibule before sunrise. Do not follow the tracks. I got the broom from the closet beside the front desk. Sweeping water off a mat is not easy. It felt ridiculous. I pushed the broom across the prints until the dark shapes smeared and disappeared into the rest of the damp rug. When I finished, I looked through the outer glass. A line of wet footprints had appeared on the porch. They led away from the doors, down the steps, and across the drive toward the trees. None came back. I stepped closer. Then stopped. Do not follow the tracks. I backed into the lobby and locked the inner door. The next morning, Caleb found me staring at the porch through the blinds. There were no footprints. He had a mug of coffee and a cut on his cheek from shaving. "You look like hell," he said. "Do you know about the rules?" He stopped. That was answer enough. "How long have you known?" He leaned against the desk and rubbed his face. "Since last winter." "And you still got me this job?" "I got you a room," he said quietly. "I got you money. I told myself Marilyn would explain enough. She didn't. She never does." I wanted to be angry again, but he looked ashamed in a way that made it hard. "What happened to the last guy?" I asked. Caleb looked toward the windows. "His name was Owen. He worked 3 months. One night he called me on the radio from the desk and asked if I could come down. When I got there, he was gone." "Gone where?" "That's the thing," Caleb said. "The front doors were locked from the inside. Staff door was chained. No tracks. His coat was still on the chair. The printer had his name on it." "In red?" Caleb nodded. "Did someone copy it into the blue book?" "No one found the book until morning." I felt cold. "What does the blue book do?" "I don't know." "Don't tell me that." "I don't," he said. "I know people still disappear when it's used. They just don't disappear the same way." That sentence stayed with me. They just don't disappear the same way. After that, I started reading the blue book during quiet hours. I know Marilyn told me not to take the night sheet away, not to copy it, not to leave it out. She did not say not to read the blue book. The first pages were old. The ink had faded brown. Names and dates. Some had room numbers beside them. Some had little marks in the margins. I recognized no one. By the middle of the book, the handwriting changed more often. There were years missing. Then months where names appeared every night. A lot of the dates were in winter. A lot of the names were written before 217. Some names had lines drawn through them. Some had been written twice. Near the back, I found Owen Marsh. The date was from the previous February. The name had not been copied in the same hard handwriting as the others. It was written in a panic scrawl, the letters leaning down the page. There was no line through it. 3 pages later, I found Harold Ainslie. Marilyn had written it after the fact. I knew her handwriting by then from the logs. Next to it, in small letters, she had written, "Not enough." I shut the book. For a while after that, every normal task felt like pretending. A guest would ask where the ice machine was, and I would answer while thinking about Harold Ainslie's slippers outside a room that did not exist. I would make a pot of coffee and wonder who had first learned to answer 307 on the 7th ring. I would print receipts and watch the ribbon to see if the ink turned red. The lodge did not become loud. It did not become dramatic. It became patient. That was how it felt. Like something was waiting for me to become used to it. 2 weeks into the job, we got snowed in hard. The storm came down from Canada and sat on the mountains for 3 days. The road closed before sunset on a Monday. By 8 p.m., the front porch railing had vanished under drifts. The parking lot lights became glowing balls in the whiteout. There were 5 guests in the lodge. A telecom contractor named Reeve in room 118. A young couple in room 203 who had ignored the road closure because they wanted a real winter experience. A park archivist named Dr. Sutter in room 301. And a man in room 215 who had checked in under the name Thomas Vale, paid cash for 2 nights, and carried no luggage except a leather satchel. I did not like him from the start. Not because he did anything wrong. He was polite. Quiet. Mid-50s maybe. Dark coat, gray gloves, neatly combed hair. He spoke softly and looked at everything in the lobby like he had seen it before and wanted to see if it had changed. When I checked him in, he asked for the west side. I gave him 215 because it was the lowest available room on that hall. He looked at the brass tag before taking it. "Close," he said. "To what?" He smiled. "Nothing. I told Marilyn about it before she went upstairs. She asked his name. Thomas Vale." She went very still. "Did he ask for anything else?" "Just west side." "Did he ask for 214? "No." "If he does, use the rule." "I know." "No," she said. "Listen to me. Use the rule exactly. Then leave the desk. Do not answer any other question, even if he uses your name." That last part bothered me. "He doesn't know my name." Marilyn looked at my name tag. I took it off after she left. By 11 p.m., the storm was so heavy the cameras showed almost nothing outside. The porch was a gray blur. The parking lot lights vanished and reappeared. The loading dock camera went black twice, then came back with ice crawling across the lens. Inside, the lodge felt too bright. I tried to keep busy. I folded towels. I restocked the little shop beside the desk with postcards, trail maps, and overpriced lip balm. I wiped the already clean counter. I checked the boiler twice. At 12:30, I locked the inner vestibule door and pulled the blinds. No headlights came. But at 12:39, someone tried the outer doors. The handles rattled once, then twice. I stood behind the desk with my eyes on the counter. No headlights. The rule only mentioned headlights. I kept thinking that. The handles rattled again, harder. Then came a voice from the vestibule. Daniel? Not sir. Not front desk. Daniel. I had taken off my name tag. I looked at the clock. 12:39. The voice came again. Daniel, open the door. It was Caleb's voice. That almost made me move. Caleb was maintenance. He had reasons to be outside. Generator, loading dock, fuel line, roof vent. If he got locked out in the storm because I was following a piece of paper, he could freeze 10 feet from me. I reached for the radio. Caleb? Static. The voice at the door said. The radio's dead. Open up. I looked at the monitor. The vestibule camera showed only blowing snow against the outer glass. No Caleb. But the audio, if that is what it was, came clearly from the doors. Daniel, come on. The rule came back to me. Do not look outside. I stared at my hands. At 12:40, the voice stopped. At 12:41, the radio on the desk crackled. Caleb's real voice came through, sleepy and annoyed. Front desk, you call me? I picked up the radio. Where are you? In bed, man. Where else? I could not answer. He must have heard something in my silence because he said, What happened? Nothing, I said. I hated how fast that came out. I unlocked the inner doors at 12:45. There were handprints on the outside of the glass. Not glove prints. Bare hands. Small enough to be a woman's or a child's. The palms had melted 2 clear patches in the frost. I did not tell Caleb. At 1:22, Thomas Vale came down the west stairs. I saw him first on the camera. A dark figure walking past the west hallway clock, then descending with one hand on the rail. When he entered the lobby, I pretended to be checking the reservation system. Evening, he said. Evening. Storm's getting worse. Yes, sir. He stood in front of the desk. He wore the same gray gloves. Do you have coffee? I pointed to the urn near the fireplace. He did not move. You must get lonely down here. It's not bad. No? No, sir. He looked at the keys behind me. There used to be more rooms. Building was renovated, I said. Was it? I think so. He smiled faintly. What room am I in? 215. And the one before that? I kept my face still. 213 is across the hall. That isn't what I asked? I did not answer. He leaned slightly closer. Is 214 still unavailable? The words were quiet. That room is unavailable. I almost said it too fast. Rule 2 said if a guest asks for room 214, say it once only. Then step away from the desk until they leave. But he had not asked for room 214. He had asked if it was still unavailable. That sounds like splitting hairs. It is splitting hairs. But at the desk, at 1:24 in the morning, during a storm, with a man watching me through gray gloves and a soft smile, it felt important. I said nothing. His smile faded. You're better than the last one. Then he turned and walked to the coffee urn. I stepped away from the desk anyway. I moved to the fireplace and stood there with the poker in my hand like I meant to adjust the logs, though the fireplace was gas and did not need poking. Thomas filled a mug, though I had not heard him take one down. He stood with his back to me and said, Do you know why the room is unavailable? I did not answer. He laughed under his breath. Of course not. He went back upstairs. When I returned to the desk, there was a key lying on the counter. Brass tag. 214. The tag was old, darker than the others, and scratched so deeply the numbers looked almost carved. I did not touch it. I called Marilyn. She came down in less than a minute. No robe this time. She was fully dressed. Boots, sweater, coat. She saw the key and stopped at the edge of the lobby rug. "Did you give him this?" I asked. "No." "Where did it come from?" "Don't touch it." I didn't. She took a white handkerchief from her pocket and picked up the key with it. Then she walked to the fireplace. For one insane second, I thought she was going to throw it in. Instead, she lifted the iron ash clean-out cover at the bottom of the hearth. Behind it was a small black opening. She slid the key inside and replaced the cover. "How many keys are there?" I asked. "One more than there should be." That was all she would say. At 2:03, the phone rang from room 307. I counted 7 rings. "Front desk." "You already checked out." I hung up. It rang again. I counted. Answered. Hung up. It rang a third time. This time, after I said the line, I heard something before I could hang up. Not words. A faint sound in the background. Music. Old music, thin and scratchy, like it was playing from a gramophone in another room. Then a man's voice said, very softly, "Ask Vale what he brought back." I hung up. My hand shook so badly I knocked over my coffee. At 2:11, the printer started. Red ink. Guest Thomas Vale. I opened the blue book before it finished printing. Thomas Vale. I did not say it. I copied it exactly before 2:17. The red ink faded. Nothing else happened. I expected a scream. A door slam. Footsteps. Something from upstairs. But the lodge stayed quiet. At 3:05, Dr. Sutter from room 301 came down to the desk. She was a thin woman in her 40s with round glasses and a permanent frown. She worked in the park archive and had been sent to review old Hartwell Lodge records that were stored in the basement. She had spent most of the day reading boxes in the dining room. She looked pale. "Can I use your phone?" she asked. "Outside line is unreliable in the storm. It's local. I need to call the ranger station." I handed her the desk phone. She dialed. Waited. Hung up. "Line's dead. Storm probably took it." She looked toward the west stairs. "Has Mr. Vale come down?" My throat tightened. "Not since earlier." She lowered her voice. "He was in the archive boxes." "The hotel records?" "Yes." "He said he had permission." "From who?" "That's what I want to ask Marilyn." I reached for the office phone, but Dr. Sutter put a hand on the counter. "I found something," she said. She opened a folder she had been carrying under one arm and slid a photocopy toward me. It was an old guest registry page from January 1952. The handwriting was neat and blue-black. I recognized the format because the current ledger was just a computerized version of the same thing. Halfway down the page was a name. Thomas Vale. Room 214. I looked at the arrival date. January 6, 1952. Departure date was blank. "That's not possible," I said. Dr. Sutter gave me a tired look. "I know." Wind hit the front of the lodge hard enough to make the blinds tremble. She pulled another page from the folder. A newspaper clipping. The headline was partially cut off, but I could read enough. "Winter fire at Hartwell Lodge leaves 6 missing." I did not want to read it. I read it anyway. There had been a fire in the West Wing during a blizzard. Officially caused by a faulty heater. Most guests evacuated. 6 people unaccounted for, including a hotel clerk, a child, and a traveling salesman named Thomas Vale. Room 214 was listed as origin point of the fire. I looked toward the west hallway. The west wing didn't burn, I said. Not all of it, Dr. Sutter said. The records say that section was sealed, rebuilt, and renumbered. Why would he be here? She did not ask who I meant. She just took the pages back and whispered, I don't think he is. Before I could answer, the west hallway clock stopped. I did not hear it stop. I felt the absence first. That steady ticking from the camera monitor, the one I had gotten used to without realizing, was gone. On the west hallway feed, the second hand sat at 3:17. Rule 7. If the west hallway clock stops, stay on the lobby rug and keep both hands visible until it starts again. I was behind the front desk. The rug covered most of the lobby, but not the space behind the desk. Behind the desk was wood floor. I looked down. My shoes were not on the rug. Dr. Sutter stood on the other side of the counter, on the rug. What is it? She asked. Step back, I said. What? Step back from the desk. She did. I lifted both hands. Slowly. That felt stupid. It also felt necessary in a way I cannot explain. The lodge went still. The wind stopped pressing at the windows. The radiator stopped ticking. Even the old lights seemed to hum lower. From the west hallway came the sound of footsteps. Not in the lobby. Not upstairs. On the camera feed. I could hear them through the monitor speaker even though it had no reason to carry sound from that hallway. Slow steps on carpet. One at a time. The screen showed the empty west corridor. Then the clock hand moved backward. 1 second. Then another. Dr. Sutter whispered, What is happening? I did not answer. My hands were up beside my shoulders. My arms already ached. The footsteps continued. On the monitor, the door to room 215 opened. Thomas Vale stepped into the hallway. He stood under the stopped clock. He looked at the camera. Then he smiled. The monitor flickered. For one frame, the hallway was different. The carpet was gone. The wallpaper was charred. The ceiling sagged open, showing black beams. Smoke smeared the lens, though the image was from a camera installed decades later. Then it was normal again. Thomas Vale raised one gloved hand. Not waving. Showing. In that hand, he held the key to room 214. The key Marilyn had put behind the ash clean out. I almost lowered my hands. Not because I wanted to. Because shock makes you forget your body. Dr. Sutter made a small sound. Don't move, I said. The clock hand ticked backward again. 3:14. 3:13. 3:12. Thomas Vale turned away from the camera and walked down the hall toward the housekeeping closet. The door at the end opened. Not in the camera feed only. I heard it upstairs. A real door opening somewhere in the lodge. Then came the smell of smoke. Faint at first. Old campfire. Burned dust. Dr. Sutter covered her mouth. The fire alarm did not go off. The boiler alarm did not go off. The computer did not change. The west hallway clock stayed stopped at 3:12. My shoulders burned. The phone rang. Room 307. I did not move. It rang and rang. I lost count because I was keeping my hands up. On what might have been the 7th ring, the phone answered itself. The receiver clicked. A woman's voice came from the speaker, small and far away. Front desk? Either of us spoke. You already checked out, the voice whispered. Then the phone hung up. The west hallway clock started again. All the sound returned at once. Wind. Lights. Radiator. My own breathing. I lowered my hands. Dr. Sutter was shaking. What did you do? She asked. Nothing. That isn't true. But it was. That was the awful part. I had done almost nothing, and still something had happened. We woke Marilyn and Caleb. We checked room 215. Thomas Vale was gone. His bed had not been slept in. His leather satchel was on the chair, empty. His coat was hanging in the closet. The window was locked from the inside. On the desk was a hotel notepad. One sentence had been written on it in old-fashioned cursive. The room is not unavailable to me. No one said anything for a while. Then Marilyn took the notepad, folded it, and put it in her cardigan pocket. Dr. Sutter left the next morning with the Rangers when the road opened for 2 hours. She did not make eye contact with me as she crossed the lobby. Before she left, she put an envelope on the desk. Inside were photocopies of the registry page and the newspaper clipping. There was also a third page. A staff memo dated 1953. It was about the rebuilding of the West Wing. The language was formal and dull, but one paragraph had been circled. To avoid distress among returning guests and staff, the former room 214 shall not be restored as a rentable accommodation. The space will be absorbed into service storage and access will remain restricted. No guest is to be assigned the number 214 under any circumstances. Under that, in pencil, someone had written, "It keeps asking anyway." I kept the pages in my duffel bag. A sane person would have left after that. I am not saying I was brave. I was tired. There is a difference. Fear takes energy. So does starting over. After enough nights, the fear became part of the job, like the boiler log or the bad coffee. I learned which sounds mattered and which did not. I learned how to watch a camera without staring too long. I learned not to look at the front windows between 12:30 and 12:40, even when there were no headlights. I learned to keep the blue book open at 2:10, just in case. The guests changed. The lodge did not. Sometimes there were no incidents for nights at a time. Sometimes the rules stacked up until the lobby felt crowded with things I could not see. The little girl came the first time in late December. I had been dreading her more than the others because of how specific the rule was. A little girl in a yellow coat after 2 a.m. That sounded like something from a campfire story. Too obvious. Too neat. When she appeared, there was nothing dramatic about it. I looked up from folding registration cards, and she was standing at the end of the front desk. She was maybe 7. Yellow coat. Wet dark hair. Snow boots. No hat. No gloves. I had not heard the doors open. She looked like a child who had gotten separated from her parents in a store and was trying not to cry. "Can I have hot chocolate?" she asked. My throat closed. The lobby clock said 2:28. Rule 6. If a little girl in a yellow coat asks for hot chocolate after 2 a.m., give her an empty cup and point her toward the dining room. Do not touch her hand. I reached under the desk for one of the paper cups we kept for coffee. My hands felt too large. I set the empty cup on the counter. Her eyes stayed on me. "Hot chocolate," she said. "I'm sorry," I said. I pointed toward the dining room. She looked at the cup. Then at the dining room. Then back at me. "You have to put it in," she said. I did not answer. She stretched up on her toes and reached for the cup. Her fingers were red from cold. The cup was just a few inches from her hand. For 1 second, instinct almost beat the rule. She was a child. She was too short to reach. I almost picked up the cup to hand it to her. Do not touch her hand. I slid the cup closer with a pen. Her fingertips brushed the paper. The lights flickered. She took the cup. "Thank you," she said. Then she walked toward the dining room. I watched her go as far as the doorway. The dining room beyond was dark except for snow light at the windows. She did not turn on the lights. She disappeared between the tables. I waited 3 minutes. Then 5. Then I picked up the radio. "Caleb?" No answer. I did not call again. At 3:10, I walked to the dining room doorway. I know the rule did not say not to follow her. It only said point her toward the dining room and do not touch her hand. But after the tracks, I had learned that the rules were not complete. The dining room smelled like dust and old coffee. There was no little girl. On the table nearest the windows sat the empty paper cup. It was full of snow. Not shaved ice. Not frost. Snow. Loose and powdery, piled above the rim. I did not touch it. By morning it had melted. When I told Caleb, he looked sick. "Yellow coat?" he asked. "Yes." He sat down hard in one of the lobby chairs. "What?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "There was a girl in the fire. In 1952. I know." "No," he said. "I mean, there was supposed to be." I waited. He looked toward the dining room. "They never found records for her. No family reported a child missing. No room had a kid registered. But survivors said they saw a little girl in a yellow coat near the west stairs before the alarm. Then after. Then outside." "After what?" "After they got everyone out." I looked at him. "She was seen outside after the fire?" Caleb nodded. "Standing by the lake?" I wished he had not told me that. The thing about strange rules is that they do not make the fear smaller. They give it a schedule. By January I knew the bad hours. 12:30 to 12:40 was for the drive. 2:03 was for room 307. 2:17 was for the red names. After 2 was for the girl. The west hallway clock could stop any time, but it preferred the deep part of night, when I was tired enough to forget my hands. Room 214 was different. That one waited for people. Some guests never mentioned it. Some did. Usually older guests. People who had been to the lodge as children or claimed their parents had. Once a snowmobile guide came in at 11 p.m. with a broken wrist and asked, while I was filling out an incident form, whether the old fire room was still upstairs. I used the rule. He left the next morning and never returned. The worst was when people asked about 214 without knowing why. A woman checking in with her teenage son requested, "Anything on the second floor, maybe 214 if you have it," because that was her son's hockey number. I said the line once and stepped away. She laughed awkwardly and took room 206. At 2:14 that night, the printer typed her son's name in red. I copied it. Before sunrise, I found his hockey bag in the vestibule. He was still in his room. He was alive. But he would not speak. His mother took him away that afternoon, furious with all of us because no one could explain why her son had woken with his hair wet and his mouth full of ash. That was when I started to understand that the Blue Book was not saving people. Not exactly. It was marking something. Or trading something. Or maybe just keeping record. I asked Marilyn again. She was in the office, updating payroll by hand because the internet was down. "What happens when I copy a name?" She did not look up. "You followed the rule." "That is not what I asked." "It's all I know." "Why red?" "I don't know." "Who started the book?" "I don't know." "You expect me to believe you've worked here 20 years and don't know anything?" That made her stop. She put down her pen. "I know more than I want to," she said. Less than I need to. That is the truth. I leaned in the doorway. I need something better. She looked older than usual under the office light. You think there's an explanation that will make you safer? There isn't. You don't know that. I know everyone who went looking for one made it worse. She opened the lower drawer of her desk and took out a photograph. It was old, printed on matte paper. A younger Marilyn stood on the front porch of the lodge with 3 other people. One was a man in a ranger uniform. One was a woman with dark curly hair. One was a boy maybe 16 years old, tall and awkward. My son, she said, touching the boy's face. I said nothing. He worked summers here. Helped with luggage. Dishes. Whatever needed doing. In 2009, he came up during winter break. I told him not to. He thought the rules were stories. That all of us were scaring him because he was young. She put the photo back in the drawer. He answered the phone from 307 before the 7th ring. I waited for the rest. She closed the drawer. There is nothing useful in the rest. I wanted to say I was sorry. It felt too small, so I did not. After that, I stopped pushing Marilyn for explanations. But I kept looking. I searched the basement archive on my off hours. Not all at once. A box here, a folder there. Old incident reports. Guest ledgers. Maintenance records. Newspaper clippings. Insurance documents. Staff rosters. Most of it was damp and boring. But boring records can be worse than dramatic ones. They show you how long something has been happening while everyone kept paying invoices. There had always been a missing room in the lodge. Before the 1952 fire, room 214 existed. After the fire, it did not. But complaints and incidents about that number continued for decades. 1956. Guest claims assigned to 214 despite no such room. 1963. Night clerk reports calls from closed west wing. 1974. Child seen in dining room during blizzard. No children registered. 1988. Maintenance worker finds wet footprints leading from front desk to porch. No entry recorded. 1997. Guest in 215 requests transfer due to man knocking from inside wall. 2009. Staff incident file sealed. 2018. Night auditor missing, front doors locked. Last year, Owen Marsh. Then Harold Ainsley. Then Thomas Vale, if he had ever been a guest in the normal sense. I found one page that bothered me more than the others. It was a handwritten memo from 1953, unsigned. The room is not the issue. The number is not the issue. The door is not the issue. The guest must be refused because refusal fixes the desk in the correct place. If the clerk leaves the desk too soon, the request continues elsewhere. I read that sentence until the words stopped looking like words. Refusal fixes the desk in the correct place. I did not know what it meant. Not then. The rule that changed meaning came in the last week of January. It was my 6th week at Hartwell. The storm that night was not heavy, but the cold was brutal. -23 by midnight. The kind of cold that makes the building crack like bones settling. We had no guests registered, which should have made the shift easier. It did not. An empty hotel is not empty when you have rules for guests. At 10:40, I did the walk-through. Lobby clean. Fireplace on low. Dining room lights off. Kitchen locked. Laundry done. East hall clear. West hall clear. Boiler pressure normal. Staff door chained. At 11:30 I made coffee. At 12:30, I locked the inner vestibule and pulled the blinds. No headlights. At 1:05, the printer clacked once but did not print. At 1:50, the west hallway camera flickered and showed a frame of charred wallpaper. Then normal. At 2:03, the phone rang from room 307. I counted 7 rings. Front desk. You already checked out. I hung up. The phone stayed quiet. I remember thinking, foolishly, that maybe the lodge was giving me an easy night. At 2:12, the printer started. Red ink. I opened the blue book. The printer typed. Guest Daniel Price. I stopped breathing. My name looked wrong in red. Not because I had never seen it printed. Because I had never seen it printed as a guest. I was not a guest. I was staff. I lived in the staff hall. My name was on the payroll sheet, the boiler logs, the bad little time clock by the kitchen. But there it was. Guest Daniel Price. Rule 5 said if the ledger printer typed a guest name in red ink, copy the name exactly into the blue book before 2:17. Do not say the name aloud. I reached for the pen. Then stopped. Every other time, the red name had belonged to someone else. A guest. Someone registered. Someone who could be checked in or out. I was alone in the lobby. No guests. No arrivals. No one to disappear but me. The clock said 2:14. My hand hovered over the page. I thought of Owen Marsh, whose name had not been copied in time. I thought of Harold Ainsley, copied but not enough. I thought of Marilyn's son, who had answered the phone too early and left no useful story behind. 2:15. The printer waited. The red ink did not fade. I put the pen down. That sounds brave. It was not. It was fear, just in the other direction. What if copying my own name was how it got me? What if that was what it wanted? What if the rule was meant for guest names only, and I would be making myself a guest by writing it down? The night sheet said guest name. The printer said guest. But I knew I was not one. I thought I had found a loophole. At 2:16, the phone rang. Room 307. I did not answer. It rang and rang. At the same time, someone knocked on the inner vestibule door. 3 small taps. I did not look. The phone kept ringing. A voice from the vestibule said, Daniel? Not Caleb's voice this time. My mother's. I had not heard her voice clearly in months. She had been sick long enough that her words came slow on the phone now, blurred by medicine and exhaustion. But the voice at the door sounded like she had before all that. Before hospital beds. Before bills. Before I became the kind of son who counted pills by cost. Danny, honey? I gripped the counter. The pen lay beside the blue book. 2:16. Danny, I'm cold. I shut my eyes. The phone rang. The voice at the door said, Why won't you let me in? I picked up the pen. I copied my name. Daniel Price. I finished the E as the lobby clock ticked to 2:17. The phone stopped. The knocking stopped. The red ink faded. For maybe 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then every camera monitor went black. The lobby lights stayed on. The computer stayed on. Only the cameras died, one by one, until the screen showed 8 dark rectangles. I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow. Measured. Coming from the west hallway. I stood behind the desk, still holding the pen. The west hallway clock began ticking through the monitor speakers even though the screen was black. Tick. 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 Then it stopped. Rule 7. If the west hallway clock stops, stay on the lobby rug and keep both hands visible until it starts again. I looked down. I was behind the desk. Off the rug. Again. The desk suddenly felt like the wrong side of a barrier. I lifted both hands. The pen fell. From upstairs, a door opened. Then another. Then another. That was when I understood the memo. Refusal fixes the desk in the correct place. The rule about room 214 was not just about refusing the guest. It was about staying at the desk until the refusal was complete. I had always stepped away because the rule told me to. But I had thought stepping away was avoidance. Like not engaging. Not arguing. Not giving the thing attention. I was wrong. Stepping away was the dangerous part, unless the guest left first. Say it once only. Then step away from the desk until they leave. Until they leave. I had been leaving the desk too soon. With Mr. Ainsley, I had walked to the fireplace before he left the lobby. With Thomas Vale, I had stepped away even though he had not asked correctly. With the hockey mother, I had stepped away while she was still standing there confused. The rule was not telling me to retreat. It was telling me to make the desk refuse first, then remove myself from whatever came after. I do not know how I knew that then. Maybe because of the sound from upstairs. The doors opening were not random. They were answering. The requests had continued elsewhere. A guest asking for 214. A room that did not exist. A clerk stepping away too early. The building finding another place to complete the transaction. I lowered my eyes to the computer. The reservation screen had changed. A check-in window was open. Room 214. Rate winter. Guest Daniel Price. Status arrived. The cursor blinked in the confirm field. Y/N. My hands were still raised. The clock was stopped. Somewhere above me, footsteps crossed from west to east. Then came a sound from behind the lobby wall. A key turning in a lock. Not in a door I could see. Inside the wall. The computer beeped. Confirm check-in? Y/N. I could not touch the keyboard with my hands visible. That was the point. I realized that too. The rules were colliding. One wanted me to keep my hands up. One wanted me to use the blue book. The system wanted me to check myself in. The voice at the door had wanted me to open it. The phone wanted me to answer. All small actions. All normal actions. All things a clerk does without thinking. The lobby rug ended a few feet in front of the desk. If I stepped around the counter and onto it, I could follow Rule 7. But to get there, I would have to lower my hands or at least move them out of sight behind the counter. I kept them up. The footsteps reached the top of the west stairs. I heard a child giggle in the dining room. Not loud. Not happy. Just a small sound, like breath pushed through a smile. Then the phone rang from 307 again. The computer beeped. Confirm check-in? Y/N. A voice behind me said, Front desk? I turned my head just enough to see the brass keyhooks. A man stood where no one had been a second before, on the staff side of the counter. He wore a dark coat burned at one sleeve. His hair was neatly combed. His hands were covered in gray gloves. Thomas Vale looked at the screen. You shouldn't keep a guest waiting, he said. I did not answer. He reached past me toward the keyboard. His shoulder brushed mine. He smelled like smoke and snow. I stepped away. I did not mean to. My body moved before my mind could stop it. One step back from the desk, toward the wall of keys. My hands dropped for balance. The west hallway clock started ticking. All 8 camera feeds came back on. The lobby camera showed me standing behind the desk. But I was not behind the desk. I was near the keys. On the monitor, the other me stood perfectly still with both hands on the counter, looking down at the computer screen. Thomas Vale was not on the monitor. I stared at the image. The other me lifted his head. He looked directly into the lobby camera. Then he smiled. I ran. Not out of the building. I do not know why. Maybe some part of me still knew the doors were worse. I ran to the office and slammed it shut. I locked it. I pushed Marilyn's chair under the knob. Then I grabbed the landline and called her apartment upstairs. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. She answered in a flat voice. Front desk? I almost said my name. I almost said it's Daniel. The rule about names was still in my head. Do not say the name aloud. Instead I said, it printed me. There was silence. Then Marilyn said, Where are you? Office. Are you alone? I looked at the dark window in the office door. I don't know. Stay there. The line clicked dead. 2 minutes later, I heard Marilyn in the lobby. Not running. Marilyn never ran. But walking fast. She said something I could not hear. Then she shouted. No. That was the only time I ever heard her sound afraid. The office door handle turned. I backed away. Daniel? Marilyn said. I did not answer. Good, she said. Don't. Open the door when I knock twice. I waited. There was one knock. Then another. I moved the chair and unlocked the door. Marilyn stood outside holding the blue book in one hand and the fireplace poker in the other. The lobby behind her looked normal. Empty desk. Computer screen on the reservation system. Camera monitor showing 8 ordinary views. No Thomas Vale. No other me. On the printer, in black ink now, was my name. Marilyn looked me over. Did you confirm anything? No. Did you say your name? No. Did you touch him? I don't think so. She shut her eyes. That is not a no. He brushed me. Her face tightened. Show me your shoulder. I pulled aside my collar. Her expression told me before I looked. There were 4 dark marks on my shirt, where his gloved fingers had touched the fabric. Under the cloth, my skin was cold. Not sore. Not burned. Cold. Marilyn took me to the kitchen, made me sit under the bright fluorescent lights, and poured salt in a line across the staff hallway threshold. That was not on the night sheet. When I asked, she said there were older rules and most were useless now. Caleb came in at 3:30 with a hammer in one hand and no shoes on. He looked at me, then Marilyn. How bad? Bad enough, she said. They did not let me finish the shift. At dawn, Marilyn told me to pack. I thought I was fired. Part of me was relieved. She stood in the staff doorway while I put my clothes into my duffel bags with shaking hands. You need to leave for a few days, she said. Then what? Then decide. I already decided. No, she said. You're scared. That isn't the same thing. I laughed, but it sounded broken. Why would I come back? She looked at the snowbank outside my small window. Because it printed your name. I copied it. I know. What does that mean? It means it has a place for you now. I stopped packing. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What kind of place? Marilyn did not answer. Caleb drove me down when the road opened. He took me to a motel in town and paid for 2 nights before I could argue. He looked exhausted. We sat in his truck with the heater running while snow slid off the windshield in wet sheets. I'm sorry, he said. It was the first time he said it plainly. I stared at the motel sign. Do you think I'm out? He did not answer fast enough. Caleb. I think you left the building, he said. I don't know if that's the same thing. I stayed in town for 3 nights. I slept during the day and stayed awake all night with the TV on low. My phone had service again. I called my sister and told her the job was strange but fine. I sent money for Mom's prescription. I looked for other work online and found nothing that would hire me fast enough. On the second night, the motel phone rang at 2:03 a.m. I did not answer. It rang 7 times and stopped. On the third night, I woke up at 12:37 with white light moving across the motel blinds. There were no cars in the lot when I looked through the peephole at 12:45. The morning after that, I found wet boot tracks leading from my motel room door toward the ice machine. None leading back. I checked out before noon. Marilyn did not sound surprised when I called. "Roads open until 4," she said. That was all. I drove back to Hartwell Lodge under a clear sky. The mountains looked harmless in sunlight. That felt insulting. When I reached the lodge, the sign was almost buried. Caleb was shoveling the front steps. He watched me park but did not wave. Inside, the lobby smelled like coffee, old wood, and radiator heat. Marilyn stood behind the desk. On the counter was the night sheet unfolded. Beside it sat a new page. White paper. Fresh handwriting. Marilyn's. "You added a rule," I said. "Yes." The new rule was numbered 8. 8. If the system shows you checked into room 214, do not deny it out loud. Do not confirm it either. Finish the shift. At sunrise write, "Still here," beside your name in the blue book. I read it 3 times. "That's for me." "Yes." "What happens if I don't?" Marilyn's face softened slightly. "I don't know." I almost asked why every answer up there ended in that. Instead, I put my duffel bag behind the desk. I went back to work. That is the part people will hate. I know because I hate it too. They will say I should have kept driving. Gone to my sister's. Slept in shelters. Anything. Maybe they are right. But fear does not erase bills. It does not give you gas money. It does not make a sick parent less sick or a person less ashamed of needing help. And by then, some private part of me believed what Marilyn had said. It had a place for me. Leaving had not stopped the phone. It had not stopped the headlights. It had not stopped the tracks. At least at the lodge, there were rules. For a while, Rule 8 worked. Every morning after my shift, I opened the blue book to the page with my name and wrote, "Still here." The first time, my hand shook. The second time, less. After a week, it became another task. Boiler pressure. Road condition. Cash drawer. Still here. That was what the lodge did best. It made impossible things into procedure. The incidents continued. A guest asked for 214 in February, and then forgot his own wife's face for 6 hours. He recovered after sunrise and thought he had suffered a minor stroke. The Rangers took him out. The little girl came 3 more times. Each time I gave her an empty cup and pointed to the dining room. Each time the cup filled with snow. The last time, she looked at me and said, "You're colder now." I did not answer. The phone from 307 began using voices I knew. My sister once. A landlord from an apartment I had lived in years ago. My own voice twice. I always waited 7 rings. I always said the line. I always hung up. The west hallway clock stopped more often after my name was printed. Sometimes for only a few seconds. Sometimes for 10 minutes. Once it stopped while I was carrying towels across the lobby, and I had to drop them and stand on the edge of the rug with my hands raised while something crawled behind the front desk. I did not look down. At sunrise, one of the towels was missing. A week later, it came back through the laundry chute, wet and smelling of smoke. I stopped reading the archives. Not because there was nothing left. Because I found a staff photograph from 1952. There were 8 people standing in the lobby, all wearing Hartwell Lodge uniforms. A manager. 2 bellmen. A cook. Housekeepers. A clerk behind the desk. On the far left, half out of frame, stood a man with my face. Not similar. Not an ancestor. Not one of those old photo tricks where you can convince yourself a stranger resembles you. My face. My eyes. My uneven mouth. He was wearing a dark suit and a name tag too blurred to read. I showed Caleb. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "Don't show Marilyn." "Why?" "Because she'll burn it." "Maybe she should." He looked at me then. "Maybe she already has." I put the photograph back in the box. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to be wrong later. The last night I am willing to talk about happened on March 3rd. By then, winter was starting to loosen in town, but not at the lodge. Snow still pressed against the first-floor windows. The lake was frozen. The road opened during the day and closed most nights after dark. We had 1 guest registered. A woman named Elise Corbin in room 203. She was a travel nurse driving between contracts who had been forced off the road by black ice. She checked in around 8 p.m., exhausted and grateful and ordinary. I remember feeling sorry for her. That was new. At the beginning, guests had felt like interruptions. Then like risks. By March, they felt like people walking into a room where I could see the loose floorboards and they could not. Marilyn gave me the shift brief at 9:50. Corbin in 203. Paid card. No special requests. Plows scheduled at 7 if weather holds. Boiler's been dipping, so log pressure carefully. Then she paused. What? She looked at me in that measuring way. You sleeping? Enough. Eating? Enough. That isn't what I asked? I almost smiled, but did not. I'm fine. No one is fine here. Then she went upstairs. At 10:30, Elise came down for tea. She was maybe 35, wearing scrubs under a sweatshirt, her hair tied up messily. She apologized for bothering me even though she was not bothering me. Long drive? I asked. 13 hours, she said. Supposed to be 6. I gave her tea from the dining room service station. She looked around the lobby. This place is beautiful, she said. In daylight. She laughed once, then seemed embarrassed by the sound in the empty room. Do you work here all winter? Yes. Alone? Mostly. She shook her head. I work nights in hospitals. I thought those were creepy. This is worse. I wanted to tell her to sleep through the night no matter what she heard. To not ask about rooms. To not answer calls. To not touch children in yellow coats. To stay away from the West Hall. But normal warnings sound insane. So I said, if you need anything, call the desk. She went upstairs. At midnight I checked the boiler. At 12:30, I locked the inner vestibule and pulled the blinds. At 12:36, headlights appeared in the drive. I looked down. The vestibule doors opened. A man stomped snow off his boots. Front desk? I said nothing. I have a reservation. The voice was different this time. Younger. Irritated. The light under the blinds moved across the lobby. The man tapped the glass. Then he said, Elise Corbin told me to meet her here. My stomach turned. He tapped again. She's my wife. She called me from upstairs. Let me in. I looked at the clock. 12:38. I knew it was bait. I knew Elise had no cell service. I knew the room phones did not call outside unless routed through the desk. I knew the voice was standing in a vestibule that was empty on the monitor. And still, it was hard. Because maybe she had called before the lines failed. Maybe her husband had been driving behind her. Maybe he was real and freezing. Procedure does not remove doubt. It just gives your hands something to do while doubt tries to kill you. At 12:40, the headlights vanished. At 12:45, I unlocked the door. The vestibule rug was dry. No handprints. At 1:18, Elise called the desk from room 203. Her voice was groggy. "Did someone knock on my door?" I looked at the east hallway camera. Empty. No one I saw. I thought I heard my husband. I held the receiver tighter. "Is your husband here?" "No," she said, and gave a nervous little laugh. "He's in Boise." "Lock your door," I said. There was a pause. "What?" "Just for the night. Old building. Doors don't always latch." "Okay." She hung up. At 2:03, room 307 called. I counted 7 rings. Front desk. "You already checked out?" This time I heard myself respond before I hung up. "Not all of me." I sat very still. At 2:11, the little girl appeared. She stood by the brochure rack in her yellow coat. "Can I have hot chocolate?" I gave her an empty cup and pointed to the dining room. She did not take it. "Not from you," she said. I kept my hand on the pen. She looked toward the east stairs. "I want the nurse to make it." "No." Her eyes came back to me. That was the first time she looked angry. Not child angry. Old angry. "She knows how to make people warm," she said. "No." The lobby lights dimmed. She reached for the cup. I slid it closer with the pen, as always. She took it. Her fingers brushed the pen tip. The pen froze to the counter. Not frost. Not ice spreading dramatically. It simply stuck there, as if glued by cold. The girl smiled. "You're almost checked in," she said. Then she walked into the dining room. I did not follow. At 2:14, the printer began. Red ink. I opened the blue book. Guest, Elise Corbin. I copied her name before 2:17. I did not say it. The red faded. Then the printer started again. Still red. Guest, Daniel Price. My name. Again. I stared at it. The clock said 2:16. I had copied my name once. It was already in the book. Every morning I wrote "still here." That was Rule 8. Rule 5 said copy the name exactly. But if it printed twice? Did I copy it twice? Did writing it again give it something more? The phone rang. Room 307. The east hallway camera flickered. Elise's door opened. She stepped into the hall in bare feet, holding the room phone to her ear. I could see her on the monitor. Her eyes were half closed. She was listening to someone. I grabbed the radio. "Marilyn, wake up. East Hall. Now." Static. On the monitor, Elise turned toward the west corridor. There was no reason for her to go that way. Room 203 was east side. The front stairs were east. The lobby was east. She walked west. The printer waited with my red name. 2:16. I picked up the phone on the 7th ring. Front desk. "You already checked out." I hung up. The moment I did, the west hallway clock stopped. Elise kept walking on the monitor. The west hallway feed showed her from behind now, moving toward the clock. Her bare feet made no sound, but I could hear the room phone she carried. A tiny voice coming from its receiver. It sounded like a man crying. I lifted both hands. Then realized I was behind the desk, off the rug. Again. The blue book was open. My name was not copied. 217 was coming. Elise reached the place where the second-floor hallway bent around the housekeeping closet. The closet door opened. On the lobby monitor, the other me appeared again behind the desk. He stood where I should have been, hands on the counter, calm as a clerk waiting to help. He looked into the camera. Then he reached down toward the keyboard. The computer beeped. Confirm check-in? Y/N. This time the screen showed two names. Elise Corbin. Daniel Price. The cursor blinked beside Y. I lowered one hand. The clock stayed stopped. A sound came from upstairs. Elise said very softly, "I'm so cold." I could have kept my hands visible. I could have followed Rule 7 and watched her walk into whatever waited behind that closet door. I could have copied my name again. I could have let the other me press the key. Instead, I picked up the radio and threw it at the camera monitor. The screen cracked. Sparks snapped behind the glass. All 8 feeds collapsed into white static. The west hallway clock started ticking. The computer stopped beeping. I ran for the stairs. I know that was wrong. I know there was no rule that said to go upstairs. There were several that suggested I should never do that. But Elise was real. I had checked her in. I had handed her tea. She had apologized for bothering me. Maybe that was all it took. I reached the second floor and turned west. The hallway was longer than it should have been. I had walked it dozens of times. From the stairs to the bend was maybe 50 feet. That night it looked twice that. The carpet runner stretched ahead, faded red and gold. The walls were lined with old framed prints of mountains and lakes. The air smelled like smoke. At the far end, Elise stood in front of the housekeeping closet. The door was open. Inside was not the closet. Inside was a hotel room. I could see a bed with a metal frame, a washstand, a suitcase, and wallpaper patterned with small green leaves. Firelight flickered somewhere beyond the edge of the doorway. Not bright flame. Low orange movement, like a fire in another room. Elise stood at the threshold. The phone receiver was still pressed to her ear. I said her name. I know what Rule 5 said. Do not say the name aloud. But the red ink had faded after I copied it. I thought that part was done. I thought names only mattered while they were read. I said, "Elise." She turned. So did something inside the room. I did not see it clearly. I saw a shape move past the washstand. Tall. Dark. Familiar in the way a reflection is familiar when it is not doing what you are doing. The phone slipped from Elise's hand. I ran to her. The hallway stretched more. That is the only way I can describe it. Each step landed, but the distance did not shrink the way it should. The carpet seemed to slide under my feet. Elise looked at me with blank, sleepy eyes. Behind her, from inside room 214, my own voice said, "Front desk?" I stopped. The rule came back too late. If a guest asks for room 214, say, "That room is unavailable." Say it once only. Then step away from the desk until they leave. The desk. I was not at the desk. I was in the wrong place. The request had followed. Inside the room, my voice said, "I have a reservation." Elise took one step backward. Her heel crossed the threshold. I said the line. "That room is unavailable." The words came out thin. The hallway went silent. Elise blinked. For a second, she looked awake. Then a hand reached from inside the room and took her by the wrist. It was wearing a gray glove. I grabbed her other arm. Her skin was freezing. Not cold from the hallway. Freezing, like she had been packed in snow for hours. She made a small sound. Not a scream. Just surprise. I pulled. The hand inside pulled back. I did not see a face. I saw the sleeve of a dark coat. I saw smoke curling along the doorway. I saw, on the far wall inside the room, a mirror. In it, the lobby was reflected. The front desk. The computer. The blue book. And me, standing behind the counter, writing my own name again and again in red ink. Elise's wrist slipped in my grip. I did the small thing that ruined everything. I stepped across the threshold. Only 1 foot. Just enough to get leverage. The room became warm. That was the worst feeling of my life. After weeks of cold, impossible cold, the air inside room 214 felt warm and stale and human. It smelled like old tobacco, wet wool, and something cooking in a pan. Somewhere beyond the room, people were talking. Distantly. Calmly. Like guests in another era settling in for the night. Elise's eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered. I pulled again. This time she came free. We both fell backward into the hallway. The closet door slammed shut. The impact shook dust from the ceiling. For a second, the hallway was normal length again. Elise was on the floor beside me, sobbing, fully awake now. Her wrist had a dark ring around it, but the skin was unbroken. I grabbed her under the arms and dragged her toward the stairs. Behind us, someone knocked from inside the closet. 3 small taps. Then my voice said, "Daniel?" I did not turn around. Marilyn met us on the stairs with Caleb behind her. She took one look at my face and said, "You went in." "I got her out." "You went in." "I got her out." She did not argue. We brought Elise to the lobby and kept her by the fireplace until sunrise. She remembered hearing her husband on the phone. She remembered walking. She remembered a warm room. She remembered me saying her name. She did not remember the hand. At sunrise, the mark around her wrist had faded. Mine had not. I had a thin gray line around my ankle, just above the boot, where the threshold had touched me. Marilyn saw it when I changed socks in the staff hall. She sat down on the bed. That scared me more than anything she could have said. "What?" I asked. She did not answer. "What does it mean?" She looked at the floor. "It means part of you checked in." Elise left with the plow crew that morning. She hugged me before she went. I stood stiffly because I could not explain that I was afraid to be touched. She said I had saved her life. I did not know how to tell her I might have traded something for it. After she left, Marilyn brought me the blue book. My name filled 3 pages. Not in my handwriting. Not in Marilyn's. Red ink, though no pen had used it. Daniel Price. Daniel Price. Daniel Price. Daniel Price. Line after line. At the bottom of the last page, in small black letters, someone had written, "Still there. Not still here. Still there." That was 2 weeks ago. I am writing this from the front desk because I do not sleep much anymore. The lodge is quiet tonight. No guests. Lights no. Boiler pressure normal. Road closed until morning. At 12:30, I locked the inner vestibule door and pulled the blinds. At 12:37, headlights came through the slats. I looked down. Someone tapped on the glass and asked for a room. I did not answer. At 2:03, room 307 called. I counted 7 rings. I said the line. I hung up before the caller could use my voice again. At 2:14, the printer started. Black ink this time. Not red. That should have made me feel better. It did not. The page says, Departure, Daniel Price. Room 214. Status pending. There is a key on the counter now. Brass tag. 214. I have not touched it. The west hallway clock has stopped, so my hands are visible. I am standing on the lobby rug. The blue book is open on the desk, too far away to reach. Someone is moving behind the front desk. I can hear him typing. Every few seconds, he looks up at the camera and smiles at me. He looks tired. He looks cold. He looks exactly like me. The computer keeps asking him to confirm checkout. And I am starting to think that might be worse.